How's it? I hope you feel better. Since you're not here today, I'm just going to do a quick little explanation about the major runs in a major scale, the Ionian mode, and then how the Aeolian mode, the sixth scale degree of that mode, tends to be towards the different ears. What we're going to be getting into are the different types of minors. I did check out Tim Henson. He is a remarkable young man. I watched a lick called the God Hand movement. It combines different right hand big thumb index movements, which are really cool. I'm actually going to work on that, see if I could do that once I get a electric up and running. But long story short, I teach more of the instrumental background of why those things work. So what happens when he's doing that first run, because I assume you're familiar with this. If not, I'll send you the link. He does like a thumping sound, which is a double thump kind of technique, not invented, but used by Jaco Pastorius and Victor Wooten, made them famous, as well as a lot of other bassists, Oteil Burbridge. Long story short is, it's about going down through the note and then pulling yourself back up while using another finger to go bump, bump, bop. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you get this kind of triplet, over and over with quicker repetition. This lick actually goes down through and then does a different pop up on different strings to represent the different tones and uses back of the palm muting on a couple of them. Very interesting, really great sound. But long story short, the first chord that he makes in that first run of things, we're going to learn how to dissect those chords and see what they are, if you want. If not, this is just the rudimentary introduction from where major and minor are the exact same thing, except for the way that you view them in scale degrees. So I want to lay this out for you really quick. When we've got our majors, as you know, we've got our 1, our 4, our 5 are going to be majors. Our minors are going to be our 2nd and our 3rd. And when I say these are going to be our minors, I'm just specifically talking about the way that our ears tend to hear them when you line up the triads. The triads that are created, no matter what key you're in, take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th for those triads. So if you're in the key of C major, and you've got C, E, and G, that's your major triad. But in that, the idea is that your 2nd and your 4th, your 2nd, your D, and your E are going to have a minor feel, because when you build their triads with the same notes in order, it tends to be a very minor or major feel. So C, E, and G is super major, but C, D, E, F, it's also a major, is going to tend to be towards the major, 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 1, 4, and 5, and then the minor, minor, and then minor, 2, 3, and 6. What we see when we're playing our scales of the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, everything except for that 7th scale is going to be the one that you're going to judge where things move and shift around for melodies. So when you play your triads, which are these, you're going to have whole step from your 1 to your 2. You're going to have a whole step from your 2 to your 3. You're going to have a half step from your 3 to your 4. Just like on a piano it would be a black key, you wouldn't have a black key between E and F. It starts at F sharp. The next is going to be a whole step between the 4th and 5th, a whole step from the 5th to the 6th, so that major to the minor, a whole step. And then when we go to this next one, our whole step is going to take us to our 7th, because we have to have 3 whole steps rather than 2 before the half, and then that half step is going to be between the 7th and the 1st. So when we're looking at our 7th tone, it's called a diminished tone. We've talked about this a little bit, but we're really going to rev it home, because majors and minors both have diminished. They have a dominant. If you add a 7th tone and it's a half step away from here, it's called your diminished. And if you have a whole step away, it would be a dominant. So if we've got a B, because we've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, all in order, and then we start over because B resolves back to C, you're going to see that that half step between here, the B, is a half step from B to C. If it was B flat, which is in between A and B, because you have A sharp and B flat being the exact same thing at the same time, you just don't call it an A sharp, because you need the 7th tone to be called a B. So it's either a B flat, B natural, B augmented, B diminished, B dominant, which also signifies where it is in that aspect, a flat half step, semitone, or a full tone, a whole tone. So when we take our half step and go through, we've just discussed how to do a major. If you look at our triads and play them out, C, E, G, major triad. D, F, A, minor triad. If the F sharp on the second fret was up here, it would be making the F sharp. But since it's not the F sharp, and that's why you've got a D right here, A right here, and then you flip these two to hit the A again and hold that D, which is why I'm trying to influence most players to play that D minor like this so they could have that extra finger for the F to give it a little bit more substance underneath. And you'll see this on the first fret being a F, A, and D. F. It's just a doubling of your F there. That F is significant because it makes that a minor. If it was an F sharp, that chord wouldn't work. You would need to move that F up to an F sharp. So our E, G, B, that's a minor. Our F, A, C, that's a major. Our G, B, D, that's a major. Our A, C, E, that's a minor. Once again, if it was an A major, it would be a C sharp, not a C. So A, C, E minor, and here's where our diminished tone comes in. You can tell when you hear the notes, the tone, B, skip your second, go to your third. When you hear a B, D, skip your fourth and go to the F, and you hear a B, D, and F, that's what you play when you're playing a diminished chord, which gives its influence of that awkward augmentation, which falls into its resolution, or falls back into a minor, or jumps back to a minor minor. Here's where an interesting thing comes in, and this is a great segue into a natural minor. When you have a flattened sixth, like we do in a major, or in a minor chord, you have a flattened third and a flattened sixth. In a minor chord, if this seventh tone was also flattened, it would pull back towards these two major chords. In a minor, our majors are actually going to be our 2, 3, and our 6, and our minor chords are going to be our 2, 4, and our 5. There are a couple different augmentations, as you'll see when I draw out the natural minor here, but this is a clear way that we can jump from the majors to the minors, and I just wanted to make sure that we're understanding this. Our modes are derived out of our major. So in this mode, right here, we've got our Ionian, which is what we've been working on. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And today we're going to talk about our Aeolian, which is our 6th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor. What happens when we talk about minor or our relative minor? All we're doing is doing the same thing we're doing in major, except we're starting on our 6th scale degree, which means our cadence, if you will, for our whole step, half step, whole step, half step, which is an Ionian structure to get your Ionian major mode with a major third and a natural 6, is to play it whole step, half step. But if you start at the 6th scale degree and you start with your whole step, you change the positioning to which you are going to hear these tones. Let me write it out for you. This is called the natural minor. There are a couple different ones that we're going to be discussing. Natural minor. Natural minor is a great one, melodic minor and harmonic minor. We're going to discuss the latter two at a further date, but this is an introductory. So if you're starting off on your 1, and your 1 is now a minor, and you're seeing it as your A, we could still say that we're in the key of C, but we could have a C minor, right? So our tone, we would have C minor. Our next tone is going to be a diminished. We're going to have a D diminished because the second tone in a natural minor is a diminished tone because it was the 7th tone. Right here, first tone. Second tone, this is a D, a diminished. What we're seeing right now is we're laying out our tonic as we head here. And in major, the tonic was Ionian, but here our tonic is not major. We're starting with our 6th scale degree, so our tonic to begin with is, you guessed it, Aeolian. So our Aeolian is going to be right here, which makes our next tone Locrian, which is going to be our subtonic, which is right next to our tonic, right? then we're going to be moving on. So let's spell out this so it makes a lot more sense. We're basically going to have our first, second, and third be a little bit different. Our third note's going to be a major, but here we're going to be having it to be a flattened note. You're going to have to remember in a minor, because we've got a flattened third, because the steps between whole step, half step, whole step is going to be different. You can see this beat building. So instead of having an E major, an E, we're going to have a E flat, okay? And that E flat's important because you could augment that to have a different kind of feeling over the top of that median tone. So because this is the third, this is the median, and because it is the first major in the string of the events, we start with the 6th, 7th, and now we're looking at basically the first. It's no longer the first, it's the third, which means you've moved a integral tone to a different part of the phrasing. You would now have Ionian. And then it just happens that when you keep going, you have your Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and then that's where it starts over again. So what we're looking at is we're going through all of our modal structures, making sure that we're going to the median. We're going to be going to our subdominant right here. The 5th scale degree is always the dominant. We'll talk of 2 of 5s and 5 of 2s and stuff like that later. After the subdominant, we've got the submedian. And you'll never really use these terms. They're just ways to associate yourself when you're talking to people who do know these terms. And then what we're doing right here is we've got this tone in a natural minor, and here's what I wanted to bring it to. In the 2 other forms of the minor that I'm going to discuss with you, the melodic minor and the harmonic minor, that 7th tone is the same as in a major. It has a half-step lending tone. It falls off, except for natural minor. Natural minor does not. It has a flattened note, which is a flattened tone, which means that note is going to be a whole step away from your resolve. So that whole step tends to pull itself back towards these major structures. And because we're going through this, I just want to build it all out. After E, we've got F, then G, we've got A. So 1, 2, 3, so my A is going to be an A flat. And then I've got another flattened note. So this is my B flat. And I want to draw special attention to this note. Actually, I'm going to play it in a different color. I want to pay special attention to this note at this point because with that flat, with the natural minor, our B flat is pulling this way towards this G and this F, which are going to be our minor influences, minor and major. But here's our major. We've got a major third, we've got a minor 4th, minor 4th. Our 5th scale degree is going to be a minor as well. Our 6th scale degree is going to be a major. I've got all these pens in my hand, it's crazy. It's going to be a major influence. And then the 7th scale degree is also going to have a major influence. So as you can see, as you can see, our whole scheme is pretty much taking a flip-flop, except for that 3rd there being a flat and that 6th there being a flat. We've got this starting here, but I'm calling it in the key of C. If we started in the key of A, it could do that, but the comparison kind of gets lost. So what we have is this tone right here is no longer a lending tone, which would have been considered the one that falls back to the resolution. Since it and its counterpart right next to each other are further away from the resolution to C, it resolves quicker and better back towards these major notes, like the A flat or the E flat. Therefore, this last tone is super special because it's different than the other 2 standard tones in harmonic and melodic minor, which both have a B rather than a B flat, which is a lending tone it's on. This one is a whole step away. So this one is basically the super tonic. And it remains a Mixolydian mode because that's where it lies inside here. And if this isn't making sense, what will make sense is when you start playing just like the major and you did do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and you drop the do, and you start with a re, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. It changes the tone. So if you've never heard any of the major minors before that, if I just started with fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi. It sounds a lot different than do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Because that last step, that seventh, isn't a resolution. It's now more thrown in the mix. And here's where the fun of music comes in. Once you can distinguish between your first scale degree and your sixth scale degree, hearing the difference between majors and minors, which you don't have an issue with, doesn't become another issue. Then you layer on the idea of your sevenths as being moving tones or not moving tones and where they rely. And then you could use the different scales, always knowing you're always going to have a triad in it. That triad, no matter what that triad is, the 1, the 3, and the 5 are super important. So if you just can, you can just memorize the 1, 3, 5, your triads are going to be basically the same, and you shift over the way where your modal structures are. You don't really even have to learn the names of these, just as long as you know the whole step and half step feelings. So, having said that, this is the introductory to the minor, natural minor. What's fun in music, there's different schools of thought in different periods in time. In certain periods of time, there wasn't really the inflection of having half steps and whole steps inside of our structures. We adapted those from the Eastern ear, if you will. And inside of the sixth scale degree, inside of Aeolian, there's more than just the natural minor, because when you add on the natural minor sevenths, you would give something like a C7 to here, a D7 flat 5 here, where the fifth scale of its own D, E, F, G, A, you would flatten A to a G sharp, and it would make a C7 flat 5. You in the third scale degree, when you're doing natural minors with the seventh, you would have an E flat major 7 that would have that half step influence tone of a diminished, but also include the feeling of a dominant, which gives a funny thing to the air. And as we talk more about this, you'll realize that a lot of like flat 5, 7 chords are used in jazz. It's an amazing chord to use. Going on in the natural minor, when we move on and put the sevens, we'd have an F minor. I'm sorry, I didn't notate these today. We would have an F minor. You understand that the little space just next to it means minor, just as this means a diminished, just as these means flat. I generally won't be putting any of these in here because I use that just in its natural sense. That's a flat, and then a flat minus these two is what you see as something called a natural mark. You'll see these all the time. So when we're going through this, I would basically say that when you're moving through, our F minor would become an F minor 7 if we were to add it to the natural sevenths. Our F minor goes a whole step over here to the G minor. The G minor would have the G minor 7, and you do that the same way you'd be using Phrygian over the top of there with those half step movements, which are awesome. And then we would go to our major. This would still be an A flat, but it would be an A flat major 7, which gives us a lot of movement and a lot of sound, because we're then able to use this as a subdominant and a submediant, meaning I could change my position at where my dominant is depending on what key I'm soloing in. And this will all make sense when I talk about jazz and the Phrygian and these half step moves of doing the same run, like a right next to each other, but they're both the same. And I've got a great example too from a band called Math Games, Fareed Hawk. All right, and then leading to our last phrase here, this, which is a seventh tone in a natural minor, it is a B flat. But when we make the natural minor a flat 7, it would be a B flat 7, which uses mixolydian, which makes sense because when you're playing a regular mixolydian chord in a major, which this is, you would have a do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and instead of having T, you'd have a T, which would be a flat 7th. In the key of C, it would not be a B, it would be a B flat, meaning you would never achieve that lending tone, means the ear is always going to be searching for that tone consistently, which is why the pull comes back to being moved from a minor back to a major, which is why almost all music has a resolution back to a major. It just is how music is written in our mind. Songs that do not end on a major or end on an augmented or a diminished or even a minor, they're specifically meant to carry a feeling. So if it begins in a minor and ends on a minor, begins in a major, ends on a minor, begins in a diminished or an augmented, like Beatles, Oh Darlin', they start on this weird E augmented chord and then go into major, Oh, darling. It's powerful. It moves the soul. And then they don't ever hit that chord again, except for when they're going through a quick bridge. I'll put that also in a reference. So anywho, this is your major that we've been working on. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If I were to say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and start that same thing over again and go la, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, it would be my minor scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If this was a B natural, it would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which changes that natural minor to either a natural, to a harmonic minor or a melodic minor, which we'll talk about later. I hope this influenced and had a little bit of fun. I'll put a description of what I'm trying to talk about in this, and try write this down for yourself, as well as writing down the circle of fifths and starting to draw that out for yourself. I missed you today. We'll see you next week, and I hope you feel better. Aloha.